What instantly ruins a movie/series for you? If you kill him, you'll become just like him. So all those countless goons that were slaughtered don't count. Huh. My favorite episode of the Mighty Max cartoon was the one where Norman was fighting the guy that killed Norman's father. He has the bad guy backed up to the edge of a cliff and the bad guy says, "If you kill me, you'll be just like me." Norman says, "I can live with that," and shoves him over the edge. Holy moly. Mighty Max. That's a cartoon I've not heard of in years. Forced romance subplot. You know someone for 24 hours or less and you are already willing to spend rest of your life with that person. How? I mean, deadass. When characters stare and kiss for what seems like an eternity when they're supposed to be in an urgent rush to do something. Disney remakes. DuckTales 2017 is better than the original, so they can be good. The new DuckTales is indeed very good, but the original was groundbreaking at the time. The level of animation used at the time was unheard of for a TV show. The newer version, using standard flash animation style that everyone uses, remains soulless in that regard. The theme song is also a downgrade. Tennant is a solid replacement for Scrooge, but still no Alan Young. Some of the more notable secondary roles are a step down to Launchpad, Doofus, Giro, Magica and the Beagles. Where the new show has improved is storytelling, bringing one Della and modernizing it a bit. Filling out the world with various bird species vs all ducks gives the show a bigger world feel. Huey, Dewey and Louie having distinct voices and personalities is huge. Webby being more independent and playing more of a role than Kid's sister is huge, and Kate McCuxey is perfectly cast. Likewise, Glomgold is far more interesting/unique now, whereas in the original he was just a second-rate evil version of Scrooge. Glomtails is ingenious and hilarious, and I always look forward to the next one. Lastly, props to the new show for not sticking with Bubba. His character in the original was jump the shark material, and the show never recovered once he was introduced. I don't know if it ruins it, but I hate when two characters have the exchange, "I have no choice," and then you always have a choice. The first line is more impactful, implying the person feels hopeless and isn't just a bad guy doing bad things. The second line just sounds like some cheesy motivational speech you'd see on a poster. Plot holes. And sci-fi/fantasy franchises ignoring their own rules. Glares angrily at J.J. Abrams. I completely agree. Glares angrily at Chris Chibnall. Chibnall didn't ignore any rules. Too many unnecessary loose ends. I enjoy when it feels intentional, and it's left loose to be your own interpretation. But if it feels lazy, I'm annoyed. Or when the ends are tied but they want more money. Cough cough Bruto. Characters acting out of character/being morons just to make the plot work. Immediately makes me see them as puppets for storytelling rather than people, and I stop caring about them. Got suffered from this in the last season. Then again with Got we all suffered in the last season. Over-sexualization. Doesn't matter if male, female or in between. I don't wanna see that. This was the problem I had with Shrek. Can't an ogre just look like a normal ogre? Stupid dummy, the sea cheeks haunt my dreams. Bad acting. Am I the only one who can't differentiate between good and bad acting? I mean, I am sure you can, but you might not realize it. Surely something like The Room Whiplash shows how there can be good and bad acting. When someone doesn't do the obvious logical thing. If that was the case, a lot of movies would be over in about 10 minutes. There's a way of writing it where it's still believable, but when characters make literally the dumbest decision, it feels too forced. Doesn't ruin a series but makes me roll my eyes when they put a sex scene in the first episode. Most sex scenes are unnecessary unless it's a romantic film. Like I was watching secret agents fighting aliens and boom. Sex sex sex. You know how high school movies are very stereotypical? That and the awkward silence and eye contact between the characters. Just remove that out the movie. Bloody hell. I hate it when they dramatically stare at each other with a booming background score that tries to make it feel emotional. It's why I prefer watching older films like Alien/S Terminator or Jurassic Park where the characters feel natural and real. Like we're simply watching real people through real events from an alternate universe. Jurassic Park had a few stares but at least it was plausible. I mean dinosaurs man. TLDR lots of modern Hollywood films are missing this sense of groundedness with the actors and I prefer the direction of acting and camera work from 70s to 90s films. When, at least on the surface, the story does not make sense within the frame of its own narrative. For example, in Star Wars we accept that lightsabers and blasters are real weapons that work. They may not in real life, but they do make sense within the story it's in. Star Wars presents a world in which we can accept that these are things that don't need to be explained. But if a magical unicorn cowboy showed up in Star Wars that can make people disappear by wishing them away, I think we'd all collectively feel that this does not make sense. Even though we've already accepted a premise of magic and lightsabers that also do not make sense. Difference being that one fits into the premise and the logic of the world. What I take issue with is therefore when a story has elements that do not make sense even when accounting for the world it is set in. Or at least, they don't bother explaining them. If you create a fantasy world where 99% of things adhere to IRL laws of physics and logic, then you cannot deviate too far from that. An example of this would be sci-fi fantasy stories where humanity has devolved into a medieval society and are using projectile weapons again and have become primitive. Yet, somehow, space travel still exists and these primitive medieval human cultures are operating spaceships, while fighting with crossbows, ballistas and spears. I feel that this is such a huge problem that a story like that needs to address it. I don't feel that this is something you can explain away with suspension of disbelief. I can absolutely see why this would bother you. However, I've always had a soft spot for steampunk, so that barely bothers me. I think this applies to steampunk as well. And I love steampunk. That's why that song, "Just glue some gears on it and call it steampunk," resonates with me regarding a similar issue. Particularly the line, "Gears are appropriate to introduce if they look like they have a legitimate use. If a steampunk world setting makes sense within the context of its own story, then that's great. Don't just slap random cogs and gears to things decoratively. The point of steampunk is alternate history centered on the steam engine. And for those contraptions to be functional rather than decorative. I think there's plenty examples of both good steampunk and bad steampunk. And what to me falls in the latter category is lazy steampunk that essentially uses the visuals of the genre without actually giving any thought to it being functional or making sense. I want to be sold on a world that I can actually believe in and that makes sense. And to exemplify this bizarre visual aesthetic of steampunk, here's a Google search result for steampunk hat: just random gears tossed on for seemingly no reason. It seems such a misunderstanding of the genre. Netflix series that just have a pure social justice episode out of nowhere. Sounds like every Netflix series ever. Except their original animes. The Peeping 3 season build up for a 15-minute fight. Statistically. Season 4. Very good point. When it has been adapted from a book and they change things. When doing what was in the book would have been just as easy or easier to replicate on screen. E.g. The Passage series by Justin Cronin. Loved the books. But the Fox series changed people's race, gender, and literal storylines. Why? Adding a love story to The Hobbit _. Don't get me wrong. I mainly watched the movie for Aidan Turner and I really appreciate that it gave him more screen time. But it was certainly not needed. After watching the movies I reread the book because I thought I was forgetting things. When the plot is based on misunderstandings. God, I hate that. What the hell's going on? I can't explain. 1 hour-long car ride in total silence later. Damn it. Explain it to me, Mary Sue. I can't, there's no time. When the child-free character suddenly decides to have kids. Like WTF, this happens in every show. Big Bang Theory with Penny. Even a progressive show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine with Jake and Gina not wanting kids at first then having them. Children ruin shows. There are so few good kid actors. Specifically and obviously placed diversity. It's even worse when it's pointed out. Personally, I don't care about race or gender for a character. As long as they're a good character that fits the story. Think Rey is a perfect example. Leading lady. Doesn't seem to struggle with anything. However, Jyn Erso from Rouge One is a great character. Her flip from apathetic to fervent rebel is a bit sudden. But still well done everywhere else. While the rest of Rouge One's cast is diverse as well. It makes sense. Characters are good. And the actors are good. Rouge One is a case study in how obvious diversity can be done very well, in my opinion. Say Rouge One just one more time. Forced romance. Especially in Western action movies. Where there is a male lead. And a hot female side character. Who shows no signs of being into each other. But will always end up kissing in the end. Also, dragging out romances. This happens a lot in anime. Where two main characters will have fallen in love super early but when anti confess their feelings until the very end. Make them a couple and use their relationship for plot FFS. When the writers/directors/whoever have two main characters flirt and act like they're going to end up together later in the series but they never end up together. Really, the whole will they or won't they true regardless of which way it goes. When the dog dies. I have a no dog movie rule. If a dog is important enough to the movie that I know there is a dog, I'm not watching it. Period. When it is criticized for something and the people behind it respond by lambasting the audience. The moment they say the movie's title in dialogue. Freaking did it twice in The Little Things and it was so on the nose I tried to tap out but my wife wouldn't let me. I could see this. But in Game of Thrones I did like when Cersei says to Ned Stark, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win. Or you die. Thought that was a cool way to nod to the show. I'm fairly certain it's a quote from the first book, A Game of Thrones too. Forced unnecessary romance and the drama around it. I beeping hate it. 95% of the speep made by Netflix in the last year. Action sequences filmed in Shakeikum. I'm looking at you, Paul Greengrass. Or at least I would be if the picture would stabilize for just a second. That crap just makes me dizzy. There are a few exceptions to this. But generally I dislike movies and shows where the cast is way too attractive. Perfectly groomed makeup, hair, clothing or their average age doesn't reflect the real sample of the society they are vaguely representing. Unfortunately, that goes for way too many 2000 mostly American popular shows. That's why I stick to British, old and animated shows. I used to be way above average moving pictures entertainment consumer. Now I'm just average. But in my personal opinion, attractivity has become more important than acting talent and abilities, and it shows big time. Blatant product placement. It works in certain situations. But when it's in your face or overdone, it's distracting. Count the logos in Man of Steel or that shiny new Hyundai Tucson in The Walking Dead that never gets guts on it or dust on it for a couple of seasons. Michael Bay is the king of product placement. Unnecessary repetition of the plot and not just finishing the series on a good note. Taking 5 full minutes to say. Simply turn a door handle for suspense. Just do it already. I ain't got all day. When the actors can't do the accent of the place they're supposed to be from accurately. Just hire a person from the beeping area. It's so stupid. But once I pick up on it, I can't stop focusing on it. It's so distracting. People trying to do an Australian accent. Computer hackers. In 30 seconds they pull up blueprints of buildings. Can operate all the lights from their computers. Find and download tons of data onto a tiny 8 GB USB drive in 10 seconds. Just know all the secure passwords randomly. All while wearing an elaborate ball gown and tuxedo. I did a media class and learned a concept called the male gaze, where basically scenes will be put in movies completely irrelevant to the plot just to show off some actress in barely any clothing to appease a male audience. And if you removed that scene, the movie wouldn't change a bit. Now I can't stop seeing these scenes everywhere, and as soon as I see one it completely turns me off watching until the end. Undefined. Ripley from Alien stripping down to her tiny panties for no apparent reason. The Tomb Raider opening sequence fight where her thighs are zoomed in on for no reason multiple times. The stark difference of Harley Quinn's costume in Suicide Squad dir. David Ayer and Birds of Prey dir. Kathy Yan. J.J. Abrams trek through in a scene with a future crew member in her underwear. Super forced. But jokes. When fun characters have kids and their whole role gets reduced to being parents. Characters completely ignoring obvious solutions to their problems. I hate it when there is some sort of misunderstanding between two characters and instead of talking about it and clearing up the issue they just ignore each other. Series mainly for me. Shows that have longer episodes, but when the episode is just talking about stuff that is irrelevant. Something we already know. Or dragging conversations out when they could have ended a while ago. In films. Convoluted circumstances of getting together. In series. Characters making the same mistakes and never learning from them, Nurse Jackie going back on drugs. The Flash where Barry goes back in time to mess with the timeline again. Poor writing. Sorry. How many times did the H50 writers speep all over Danny Williams' character to make Steve look good? Those straight couples they force into a show, like, why do they have to shove it down our throats? Oh, and diversity. I mean, come on, I like my shows like real life. Without a single minority in it. Disrespecting a character or just really unnecessary filler for a majority of something. Overused stock sound effects. It's when they don't kill the big bad because heroes don't kill. And then the big bad ends up killing my favorite character and bam, that's how they ruin it. 30-something high school students. I hate when women fall down. It's not funny. We're watching Scrubs right now and they make Elliot fall down for no reason like every other episode. When they kill off my favorite characters or just the ones I happen to think are cool. When Glenn dies. Movie trailers that basically reveal the entire plot and 80% of the good/eye candy sequences. Why bother then? The homosexual relationship out of left field just to appeal to that audience. I mean, I can't speak for them, but it seems a little offensive sometimes the way they use them so flamboyantly. Also repetitive cliches like doctor shows always portraying patients suddenly flatlining due to some bizarre event, or rom-coms always making characters fall in love/break up in some outlandish manner or for the sake of the plot. R34 art. When it should have ended a few seasons ago, but it kept going by adding unnecessary details/branches to the plotline for popularity's sake. An example is Supernatural. It got way too boring and repetitive, so I stopped watching it. Dragging out a good story to make another series. I get bored at series 2. I'm looking at you. Lost, which just went stupid. And The Last Ship, which clearly wasn't. What was the second series that branched from Lost? A lot of British folks use series how we use seasons in North America. Bad effects/animation. Speepty or incomplete endings. When characters have predefined personality type. Like the comic one who will just be the funny dumb dude making jokes all along the movie without evolving at any point. This is some lazy ass character development that just kill the interest I can have in some characters. When an character's entire personality is that they are a total slut. Woke virtue signaling. Massive red flag that a series will be speep. When a friend doesn't tell you the plot but tells you there is a twist. Pretty much ruins everything. When characters become caricatures of what made them great in the beginning. Prime example is Joey on Friends. Started out as goofy and slightly dumb. Ended up functionally brain dead. If the dog dies or is abused at all. A forced gay relationship out of nowhere. The Walking Dead. They will never just call them zombies. Just say zombie. Forcing a gay character not when the story requires. I don't judge anything. It's like lately they are pushing if hard even if it's not needed for the story. Hollywood would have you believe that 40 to 50% of the population is LGBTQ. This is the narrative that doesn't reflect the real world around us. Nothing tbh. One thing never ruins the whole picture for me. Inner monologues where the person they're interacting with just stands there waiting for it to finish before speaking. Mr. Robot made me wince with this. Seriously, if you watch it and mute the TV as he's thinking, you see how long the awkward silences go on for. When the villain is obviously lying. And the characters believe them for no good reason. Also villains that lack any good motivation other than being evil. When it's too slow and doesn't get to the point. Wanna talk to my dear friend Bruto?